When Chevrolet introduced its all-new 5th generation Corvette for 1997, it was a big deal. We hadn't had a new Corvette since the C4 came out in 1983, and the new car promised lots of new technology. It had a sheet-molded composite body, a hydroformed steel frame, a rear-mounted transaxle, and then the centerpiece of the whole thing was a brand new all-aluminum V8 engine. It was the Gen 3 small block. It was the introduction of the LS. The thing is, there's a lot of people today who throw shade at the C5. But if you scratch the surface a little bit, you'll find there's also legions of fans for these cars. A lot of those people think this is the best performance car value going today. So today we're going to do a deep dive on the C5. Take a look at it, see what makes it tick, look at its good points, its bad points, give you some things to watch for if you're shopping for a C5, and then try to determine who's right, the haters or the fanboys. When the C5 rolled out for 1997, it was initially offered only as a standard coupe, like our 2000 model here. The following year, in 1998, Chevy introduced the new Corvette convertible, and the year after that, in 1999, they introduced the fixed roof coupe. But by far the most common body style is the standard coupe, and all standard coupes have this removable roof panel, as they had in the C4. The nice thing about this is that the C4 required tools to get the top off. The C5 has clasps that you can undo by hand. Now this car has the optional tinted transparent top, but you could also get a painted roof, or you could option both. And all the Corvettes with a hatch have a storage space, so it's very easy to get the top out and stowed so you can take off for open air motoring. The 1997 Corvette gave us our first look at the all-new Gen 3 small block, the LS. This is the LS1, and it was rated, as we said, at 345 horsepower when it came out in 1997. A little bit later, GM introduced the Z06 Corvette in 2001 as the top-tier, highest-performing Corvette. That's kind of its own deal, and we'll do a review on that separately later on. The significance here is if your Corvette C5 is a 2001 or newer, it's going to get the intake manifold from the LS6 engine that was unique to the Z06. That means you're going to have a 350 horsepower engine. Now under the engine bay here, there are a few things to be aware of. The C5 used flip-up headlights just like the Corvettes before it. It used electric motors with a gear drive, and they are known for going bad now that the cars are older. It's not a big deal to replace them, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Another thing to be aware of in the C5 engine bay is the battery. Now it's easy to get to, but the problem is that the typical lead acid batteries leak, as they often do. The problem there is that the engine computer is underneath it, and it's becoming more and more common to find C5s where the battery has leaked down and damaged the computer. C5 people say the quick fix is to just get rid of the lead acid battery and replace it with an AGM battery like an Optima. Another thing under the hood you're going to want to be aware of is the ABS unit. There are two used on C5s, an early and a late. And the early unit is no longer serviceable. You can't buy a new one. It's also starting to become known as a trouble area. It's also not easily fixed. So if you're shopping an early C5, that's one pre-2001, you're going to want to make sure that the ABS unit is working correctly. Now the engine itself can be modified pretty easily. There's tons of stuff on the aftermarket to get even more power out of this and to remain reliable. But if the C5 you're looking at has been modified, you're going to want to know what's been done to it, what parts were used, and do a little research online to see what people are saying about those parts to make sure you're not buying into a problem. But at this point, after all these years, it's well known that the LS is essentially bulletproof. So one part of the C5 that is often criticized is the interior. That's probably because there's a lot of plastic in here, and it looks like plastic, and it feels like plastic. And 25 years later, that hasn't gotten any better. I will say that for a two-seater, the C5 Corvette is a fairly comfortable place to spend time. Now, there are two different types of seats offered in regular Corvettes during these years, the standard seat and the sport seat. Our car's got the sport seats, which you can identify by the pass-through hole up in the headrest. Sport seats are also the ones that have the Corvette embroidery on them. Standard seats don't say Corvette on them. Leather is what you're going to find most of the time. Our leather covers are a little torn up, but new seat covers are readily available, and they're not that hard to change, so that's not too big of a deal. Something that is commonly wrong in the interior of these cars is the HVAC controls. They work most of the time, but the displays are often blank. We had that happen with this car. There's a lot of people online who've given instructions on how to take the unit out of the dash and solder the cold solders back in place. Junior did that on our car, and it didn't take him too long, and now it works just fine. Another thing that goes wrong with the HVAC are the blend doors that are up under the dash. There's one for the driver and one for the passenger. The one on this side on this car was failed. They're just electric stepper motors, and they go bad when they get old. They're not too expensive. They're a little tricky to replace just because of access, but you can do it yourself. The instrument panel is easy to read. It's not too trick like some of the earlier C4 Corvettes. It's just straightforward sports car stuff. The head-up display was an option on earlier C5s. It became standard later on. That's something you want to check to make sure it's working correctly. And you want to make sure that the airbags are okay. The clock spring for the steering wheel sometimes goes bad on these and gives you an ABS light. Now, another thing that was commonly failed on C5s was the key cylinder. The ignition lock is not on the steering column as it was on earlier GM cars. It's in the dash, and the mechanism that locked the steering column often failed. There was a service bulletin on these. If you're shopping a C5, you want to make sure that work was done. One quirk on the C5 interior lies with the pedals. Chevy gave the cars these really cool aluminum brake and clutch pedals. Even automatic cars got a big aluminum brake pedal. And yet the gas pedal is the same black plastic unit you might find on a '69 Camaro. The great thing about the C5 is that most of the parts are still available. The aftermarket has really embraced these cars, so all the stuff that GM has stopped making, the aftermarket probably has. That means that anything that goes wrong in here is really not going to be a deal breaker. So we'll start our undercar walkthrough with this air dam up here, the black plastic one. GM considered this a wear part. They knew it was going to drag on the ground and get worn out, so they're often broken or just all scuffed up. If yours is missing though, you need to replace it because the car is relying on that for air for proper cooling. Then move under here, you're going to see a lot of aluminum. There's a nice aluminum engine cradle, there's aluminum control arms, there's even an aluminum oil pan, and the Corvette gets this nice butterfly style pan that's baffled. It's pretty cool. They were really taking this seriously as a road race car. Shock absorbers are fairly conventional, and they're probably worn if you're looking at a C5 now. People with Corvettes tend to like Bilsteins, but another thing that a lot of people are doing these days is using C6 Z06 shock absorbers, which GM is still selling, and they're reasonably priced. A lot of Corvette guys seem to think that they're a good balance of road manners and handling, and again, the price is right. One thing to note on shock absorbers, some C5s had electronically adjustable dampers. If you are going to move away from the electronic dampers, you're going to want to maybe get somebody with a scan tool to plug in so they can turn off the controls so you're not getting warning messages about that. Moving further back here, Corvettes very often have headers installed, and that's fine if they're smog legal. But a lot of long tube headers for these cars require the elimination of the cats. So if you see headers from up top, you're going to want to look to make sure there's still cats under here, because you're not going to be able to get through smog inspection without them, and it gets kind of expensive if you have to replace them. Most Corvettes have had the cat back exhaust replaced at this point. In fact, a lot of owners replace that immediately. This car has actually got the original exhaust system still on it, and there's nothing wrong with these. They're a grade of stainless steel. They're pretty long lasting, they sound good. It's not a problem if yours is original, and just leave it. And when you get further back, you'll see the rest of that exhaust system. It's a little unconventional because the mufflers are off to the side here. Now again, a lot of cars where the exhaust has been changed, you might not have mufflers here anymore. A lot of people like to run a pipe straight back to the tips. That's fine if you don't mind the noise, but if you like to avoid the resonance and other things, see what you've got up here for mufflers. There's a whole broad variety of exhaust systems that the aftermarket does for these cars that all kind of come out in the same place. A lot of stainless steel stuff, so if it's been changed, you may not have to worry about it. One thing on these cars, I mentioned earlier, they have a transaxle. That's not entirely true. It's actually a transmission and differential that are just bolted together in the back of the car. However, the clutch is still up front here. And the clutch itself is fairly conventional. There's not a lot of trouble with those, but one area where there is sometimes problems is with the hydraulics for the clutch. The slave and the master on a C5 were joined together with a plastic line that can't be taken apart. So the fix on a lot of these cars is to upgrade to C6 parts, which bolt right in place, but they use a braided line that has a split in the middle, so you can change the master or the slave and not both. Changing the clutch on one of these is a big job. There's a torque tube on these cars, and you have to remove the torque tube and the transmission and the differential to get to the clutch. And again, that's kind of a big job, not one that a lot of guys are going to want to do in their driveways. There's plenty of videos online. You can see what's involved in that job. Just be aware when you're shopping for a manual transmission C5, if the clutch needs to be done, you're in for either a lot of work or a significant repair bill. One other thing to be aware of on C5s is that they use 2 gas tanks. They're right here and here. Now the tanks themselves are usually not a problem, but the arrangement GM used is a little unconventional. The driver's side tank has the fuel pump and the fuel gauge sending unit, and then it's plumbed in such a way that the driver's side tank draws fuel from the passenger side tank as needed. The thing you want to be mindful of is that the gas gauge is working correctly, because it's got a kind of an odd logic, and it's not uncommon for them to not work, but just something to be aware of. If the gauge isn't working right, you're going to want to look into that a little bit. Now overall, this particular Corvette is what you want to see in terms of its condition. It looks like it led a fairly sheltered life, even though it's got 100,000 miles on it. So C5 Corvettes used staggered wheel tire arrangement. They had 17s in the front and 18s in the back. Front tires are 245/45 17, and these rears are 275/40s. Now, it's very common for C5s to have had their wheel tire combinations changed out. In fact, our car has aftermarket wheels on it. These look vaguely Corvette-ish, and the design is sort of like a Z06, but they're aftermarket. The thing is, on this car, these are the stock sizes, and the tires are also the stock sizes. You want to be mindful of the wheels and tires that are on the car you're looking at, because if they're not stock, they might rub. It's very common for people to put 18s in the front on these, and you can do that, but you have to select the tire size wisely. And then, of course, it also depends on whether or not the car has been lowered. Another thing to be aware of on standard C5s is that they came with run-flat tires. Now, run-flat replacements are still available, but it's really common for owners to have switched away from run-flat tires. And there's no problem there. You just need to be aware of the fact that these cars didn't come with a spare tire, and they also did not come with an inflator kit. By the way, these things actually get pretty decent gas mileage. I think the 6-speed C5 with the base engine was rated at like 28 miles a gallon on the highway. C5s could come with a manual transmission or an automatic, and I think the stick kind of makes the car. The automatic would be fine. A lot of people who want Corvettes just like to cruise. They like the look of the car and the feel of it, but they're not really into driving. My point of view is, again, the stick makes it a lot more interesting. The 6-speed in these cars works pretty well. It's a T56, and they're known for smooth shifting. It's kind of a polarizing car. Some people love it, some people really don't like it. I think it's kind of a great car to get behind the wheel of, and the people who really seem to like the C5 are usually drivers, and often people who take these cars on road courses, or at the very least, who use them on back roads in a sporting fashion, and these cars are really good at that. And we had just spent a lot of time driving a C3, and this is a huge leap forward from that car. Of course, you could take a road trip with it pretty comfortably. I'm 6 feet tall, and I fit in this thing fine. There's room above my head, and the seat will go back more. Sport seats in this one are really fairly comfortable. Overall, I think the fanboys got it more right than the haters on these cars. They're easy to drive, easy to live with. You can do a lot with one, and they're reasonably priced. Styling is subjective. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. Overall, C5 not a bad car.